As part of budget negotiations this spring, Governor Kathy Hochul is looking to scale back some of the requirements in New York's 2019 law that set ambitious standards for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the Empire State. The governor's main goals are to push back the timeline for rules and regulations to implement green energy plans and to change how methane emissions are counted in order to discount their impact on the environment. The responses to this effort have spanned the gamut, with the business and labor community welcoming the proposal, while environmentalists are pushing back, and some GOP lawmakers have argued the governor should go further in dismantling the state law. For more on the issue, as well as providing short-term and long-term utility bill relief for New Yorkers, we're joined in the Capitol Press Room by State Senator Tom O'Mara, a Southern Tier Republican who served as chair of the Senate Environmental Conservation Committee when the GOP controlled the chamber. Welcome back to the show, Senator.
Thanks, David. Nice to be here.
Glad to have you. So the governor has argued that her approach balances the state's interests in both reducing greenhouse gas emissions while also ensuring the road to achieving those goals isn't substantively increasing costs to New Yorkers, a sentiment that has been echoed by the Business Council of New York. What do you think of the tightrope that the governor is trying to walk here?
Well, she's definitely on a tightrope. I don't think what she's offering is any real change to what's going on other than moving some deadlines out. The anxiety over the CLCPA implications to business has been profound, and just pushing this date out a little bit without any substantive changes to what they're going to do, and still having no plan on how to get there, because we're seeing manufacturers in particular leaving the state left and right. There's news articles about it all the time, going to other states that have the cheaper energy or an outlook that they can rely on. They need consistency. They need to know what they're looking at. And if they're going to make investments in their operations, they're choosing not to make them in New York. And that's a big concern. It's costing us jobs across the state.
But you bring up the business community, and as I mentioned, the Business Council of New York State has embraced the governor's plan. They haven't said something like this doesn't go far enough. And the point of the manufacturers, we've spoken with McNee, a group you're familiar with, and they talk about how the governor has provided some long-range stability with things like her plans to embrace nuclear energy. So can you square what you're laying out compared to what business leaders are saying?
Well, the governor's looking at pushing it back 10 years. Nuclear is probably about a 20-year proposal to get into that, maybe 15, best case scenario from everything I hear. So just pushing the goalpost out 10 years is really doing nothing.
Well, there's a shorter implication, though, with the rules and regulations. I mean, they were supposed to be out in 2024. The governor's being sued right now by environmentalists. I mean, pushing those back 4 years to 2030 seems like that would have a pretty substantive impact in delaying any real-life consequences.
It delays it by 4 years, and,
Sure.
and you get right back 4 years from now, which will pass very quickly to the proposals of cap and invest costing upstate homeowners over $4,000 a year, raising gasoline by over $2.20 a gallon on what the prices are today, increasing costs for small and medium-sized businesses, increases in their utility costs by 46%, and increasing in trucking and delivery costs by 60%. Those are not increases that these businesses can absorb. Those are not increases that they will be passed on to every consumer of every good and every service in this state. And New Yorkers, they can't afford it. We're struggling right now with the increases we've seen already, a lot of which has to do with the impacts of the CLCPA and what the utilities have had to build out to get even to where we are today with impacts. We've got 1 in 8 ratepayers not paying their bills. That says things are too expensive, and they're only getting more expensive. So nothing in the short term to help with utility rates at this point.
Sure.
The governor says she's going to provide some relief in how these rates are calculated in the future. That doesn't do anything with the high rates that we have right now, and the high rates that just got instituted a week ago for National Grid ratepayers. That is going to raise when phased in over the year, it's going to raise their monthly bills by about $15 a month or $600 a year on top of the high bills that they're paying already. It's only going to exacerbate the situation. It's not going to help with the business community, and they're needing some reliability on moving forward. So I can understand the business group being okay. Yeah, it's better that she's these offering these things, but she's offering no real plan other than delaying this. And we still have no plan how we're going to get there. It's still based on dispatchable emission-free resources, DFRs, that don't exist.
Sure. So a lot to unpack there. Yeah. On the cost side of things, the environmentalists push back on the estimates that you cited, some of which come from an NYSERDA analysis, which really assumes the worst case scenario for implementing a cap and invest program, and also doesn't account for some of the rebates that people would be provided for in a cap and invest program. But in terms of how the CLCPA has impacted costs today, because right now there is a real problem with people's utility bills. The analysis that we've seen is that the CLCPA accounts for maybe 10% of those costs. So what is it about the law? Because as the governor has pointed out, they really haven't implemented it. That is, from your perspective, driving up utility rates today.
I believe they are driving up utility rates for the build out of the grid, the changes to the grid that utilities have been going through over the last several years since the CLCPA was implemented.
But have we needed upgrades regardless? I mean, we have an outdated transmission and generation system.
Not to the extent that they're pushing forward with right now.
Okay.
And the biggest concern with that, if they say it's only $10 a month, if that's accurate,
10% of the bill. Yeah.
If that's accurate, why not disclose that to the ratepayers? There's been no disclosure.
Sure.
Openly about what these costs are. They're hidden on the utility bill. I have a bill to require disclosure and itemization of those on every monthly utility bill to the ratepayers, so they see it. Because I've been saying since I was chair of the ENCON committee when we lost the majority and the CLCPA was pending in that committee, that there is no plan. There's only a ban on using fossil fuels going forward. And they're incremental, so that everything was set up so that the Public Service Commission is making these decisions. NYSERDA is making these decisions. DEC is making these decisions, the specifics of which are what impacts people's rates. And now you're seeing, as I said 9 years ago, you're going to see these Democrat majority legislators, when this thing blows up, because I've said as soon as ratepayers find out what this is going to cost them, they're going to lose their minds, and they are. So they just have not been forthright with what this is going to cost.
Well, before we talk about the short-term response to utility rates, the last question I have on the broader question about efforts to reduce emissions, what do you think we could be doing or should be doing to boost our green energy production, or should that not be a priority for state policymakers?
No, I believe it should be a priority, and I'm supportive of the efforts to clean our energy system. New York State is a leader in this effort. We have been a leader in this effort. We've had significant reductions in emissions from power electricity production over the last 20 years, to the tune of 85% reductions. So we're doing it, and we should continue to do it, and New York should continue to be a leader. But we can't have just a couple of dates into the future and what the emission level has to be then without any plan on how to get there. And it's based, as I said, on these DFRs, technology that doesn't exist. We've got to encourage the technology to grow and utilize that going forward as we can. But to have these artificial dates and percentages that aren't based in reality is just it's not going to work. And as I said at the outset, it's just causing anxiety throughout ratepayers, throughout my district, throughout the state, and for businesses where these costs keep continuing to go up.
So in the short term, you're looking to provide some relief by taking and reallocating some money that the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority has that is actually designed in the long term to support some of those clean energy goals that the state has put into place, and direct about $3 billion to utility relief. Why do you feel like that's a good pot of money to tap to provide relief in the short term, given that that could, potentially cause some long-term problems, because this is money that's supposed to, address our electricity supply prices in the long term?
Well, all this money is allegedly being collected to comply with the CLCPA for projects that will comply with these clean zero emission standards and be able to distribute the electricity as that demand grows, and presumably, in theory, emission-free electricity is available to run through those lines. That's just not what the case is now, and they've been collecting. They're collecting over $2 billion a year in surcharges on ratepayers' bills. NYSERDA has a surplus of over $2 billion in funds for these programs going forward. They haven't identified what the money's for, and their 5-year financial plan shows them carrying that balance of over $2 billion a year forward each year. And in addition to that, the utilities collect these surcharges on our monthly bills as we get them, and they're not identified on the bill. But they collect them, and they hold those surcharges until NYSERDA asks them to send them over. So National Grid, NYSEG, RG&E, Con Ed, they collect these, and they hold them until NYSERDA says, send over what you have. So in addition to the $2.4 billion that NYSERDA has in hand, there's about $700 million that the utilities are sitting on waiting for NYSERDA to ask for it. We need some immediate relief for ratepayers, and this is a quick way, and the money's there available to provide some relief to our ratepayers at this time. Because everything the governor is talking about and the majorities in the legislature are talking about, just kick this can down the road, and it's just going to continue to make ratepayers' bills go up.
How would you want to distribute those funds? Would it be on an income-based level? Would it be based on how big people's bills are? What would that relief program look like?
I think that's certainly open for discussion for how to do that. And I think there should be some income-based basis for that, so those most in need get the most relief. But frankly, everybody, no matter what your income level, everybody's paying more on their utility bills, and it's affecting everybody's cost of living in New York. Every other sentence out of the Democrats' mouth here in Albany is about the affordability crisis we have in New York State. Yet everything they do makes everything more expensive.
What about, you mentioned the issue of arrears for New Yorkers. What about changing, say, the late fees that utilities are applying to some of these bills and the restrictions they have on letting people come up with certain payment plans? Is that something that the state should be looking at as well?
Well, I think so, to provide some flexibility for those that may fall behind, to give them the ability to catch up. But there's got to be a feasible way to collect that going forward. You can't just drag it out forever. But certainly these are aspects that can do it. But the only thing that the state has done right now for the lower income individuals is basically take money from other ratepayers to pay the lower income ratepayers to pay their bills.
And what about the argument that the state should be looking to limit the profits that these utilities are getting and direct some of that money back into the pockets of ratepayers?
Well, that's good. That's well and good. These are businesses.
Regulated monopolies.
Regulated monopolies that are investor-owned. And there's discussions of lowering the rate of return for these investors. Well, you want people to invest in these companies so they have the resources to be able to go out and do these build-outs that are being required, because there's costs in addition to these surcharges that are being collected. So it's just not that simple and straightforward to say we're going to cut their profits, because if people stop investing in the utilities, then we're going to be even in a worse position than we're in now.
Well, we've been speaking with State Senator Tom O'Mara. He's a Southern Tier Republican. Senator, thanks for visiting us in the studio.
Thanks, David.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided in part by the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Fraud and lawsuit abuse impact car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Reforms are being proposed to mitigate their impact. Information on these reforms is available at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.